Welcome to the Morning Formation. Again, our guest today is going to be retired First Sergeant Samuel Phillips, my father. He's an Army veteran, having served 20 years after being drafted at the end of Vietnam in 1971. So last episode, he shared with us his experiences from his time as a drill sergeant, and when we stopped at the point of when he was beginning his time after his drill sergeant stint. First Sergeant, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
So when we last spoke, you were finishing up your second stint as a drill sergeant, but let's go back and so we can chronologically talk about this. So you did 3 years. You did your 3 years of your drill sergeant time at Fort Knox, and at that point you were in E6, right?
Yes, 6 at the end. Yes.
And then you got stationed in Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, right?
Yes, I did. 25th Division, Combat Support Company, 4.2-inch mortar platoon. In first of the 27th Infantry Wolfhounds, and that's where I spent that entire 2 years. 2 deployments to Korea during that 2 years, from Hawaii to Korea. First deployment was a month long, and the second deployment I stayed there for about 2 months. Had several trips over to the Big Island, the Hakaloa training area. After 2 years, I just had the urge to go back on drill sergeant duty again, so I filled out the paperwork and sent it in and got approved to leave after 2 years, to leave the 25th Division and go back on drill sergeant status again. And again, I was sent back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I spent the next 2 years as a drill sergeant there.
And then from there, you transitioned, after your 2 years, you transitioned into the regular Army. So talk about where was your next stop after that?
After my 2 years on drill status, second time, I went, I got orders first. That was pretty lucky on my part. I got orders to go to 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum, New York. And man, I did not want to go to New York. I didn't even want to think about it. So anyway, I got on the phone right away and called the assignments branch at Department of the Army in Washington. And I just expressed my desire not to go to New York. Got anything, anywhere. I'll take anything, anywhere, not New York. And after talking to the guy on the phone, I found out that the sergeant in charge of the assignments, me and him had gone to the advanced course at Fort Benning, Georgia together. We both live in Charlie. And he found out that I had done real well on my last 2 SQT or skill qualification tests. And he said, "Oh man," said, "I'm lucky today because I found you." And he said, "We need somebody that's real efficient in 11 Charlie procedures to go to Florida and work with the Florida National Guard." I said, "That's exactly what I wanted." Anyway, he revoked those orders. Just a few days later, I got orders revoking New York and reassignment orders assigning me to Fort Gillem, Georgia, with duty at Patrick Air Force Base in Florida, and that's at Cocoa Beach.
Mm-hmm. So you went from the Mountain Division down to the Beach Division.
Yes, I did.
Wow, you're so lucky.
I was in a group there called the infantry team. We had about 40 soldiers altogether, roughly, in the readiness group, and there was 5 infantry, 2 special forces. I know there was some artillery and some armor. All the major MOSs had somebody there to go out to the Florida National Guard and assist them in their training. And there was, in my infantry team, we had 2 E7s, E8, a captain, and a lieutenant colonel. The commander of that readiness group was a full bird colonel who had just got reassigned, like I did, from a unit. He was a brigade, Colonel Dickinson. He was a brigade commander prior to getting to Florida, a brigade commander at the 82nd Airborne. He said that his requirement was that we travel to National Guard units and work with the National Guard 180 days a year. And he said, then when I get my report in and I see that you traveled 180 days, he said, then I will know that you did the minimum that you could to get by. He said, so I would suggest you travel more than that. So probably around 200 to 220 days a year, we were traveling to National Guard units. most of them were overnight because most of the trips we went on were by car. We had government vehicles. We did have one plane when we'd go to Miami. Sometime we'd fly. When we'd go to Tallahassee, sometime we'd fly. But we had infantry units that I dealt with personally, all the way from down at Homestead, Florida. We had an infantry unit all the way up into the Panhandle in North Florida, and then from east to west coast, in the middle of Florida and all over. So I got to see just about all of Florida that there was to see. And it was really impressive that the Florida National Guard, the infantry side of it at least, was very, very efficient in their duties. They really impressed me. And then every year, of course, when the National Guard would have their 2-week summer camp, the infantry would go to Camp Blanding, Florida, which was up in kind of north, close, not too far from Tallahassee. And that's where they would do the 2 weeks training, and we'd have to go with them every year and stay with them for 2 weeks. And it was an interesting job. I liked that job quite a bit. And I'd have to take TDY trips to Fort Benning occasionally to make sure that I was up to speed on all the current things that I was telling the National Guard. And if there's anything changed, I have to come back and relay that onto the National Guard units.
So you were almost like the NCOIC for the entire Florida National Guard training section.
Kind of. Any questions they had, they looked at the readiness group for help. And anything that they didn't understand, they knew they could call the readiness group, and somebody there was going to come down and sit down with them and explain and talk and teach classes. I've taught FDC classes.
What's FDC stand for?
Fire Direction Center.
For mortars.
I taught that. We'd teach you classes because they just weren't, I guess, good enough to teach, and they were, but I think they just kind of felt better when we'd do it. Plus, we had to do something anyway. So we enjoyed going down. I did. I enjoyed going out to the units and teaching any kind of class. Followed the Florida. One of the Florida units went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to do a live fire with mortars. And they called me and said, "We're going up there. We'd like to have you around to watch us and see if we're doing everything the way we're supposed to." So I'd follow them to Fort Rucker and stay with them while they're doing their live fire. And
I can totally understand why. I mean, if you're going to be instructing, you need to rehearse, and you need to. And if you're doing it, as National Guard 1 week in a month, you don't have that time to actually, sit down and rehearse and the instruction that you're going to put out. So I could see why they would want someone that's full time, that this is your day and night, basically, that you're going to be instructing and knowing the ins and outs of everything. So that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that. I heard you mention in one of the earlier podcasts about it's a small world. I was out there at Camp Blanding at summer camp one day, walking through a big pine thicket, and I heard somebody say, "Joe Phillips." And I turned around and looked and saw the name tag and still wasn't sure who it was, but I recognized that name tag. But it was a guy that I grew up with. He lived from my home that I grew up in Clearfield, Kentucky. He probably lived 300 meters away from where I did. And I hadn't seen him since he was just a little tiny boy. But he knew me, knew my face enough to call my name, see if I stopped. I've seen him once after we both retired. I seen him once.
Yeah, he was part of the Florida National Guard at the time?
No, he was, what was he doing? He was
active duty Army.
Yeah, he was active duty Army, and he was sent down there to summer camp to evaluate the training that they was doing. I don't know where he was. I don't remember us talking about that. I don't know where he was actually stationed, but he was TDY to evaluate their training. See, that's what these other people do. They would evaluate, and then if they did bad, they wouldn't tell them how to fix it. They would just write, "Oh, these people really suck at what they're doing." Our job was to go out, and if we seen them doing something wrong,
Right.
we wouldn't tell them they suck at what they're doing. We'd tell them what they're doing wrong, and this is what you need to do, fix it. So
Right.
we were the good guy.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of good to hear that you had a good working relationship with the National Guard, because I know a lot of times the reserves, National Guard, and active duty military, sometimes there's, I don't want to say friction, but there's a lot of stereotypes, a lot of things in there that basically that people think about each component, but it's refreshing to hear that you guys had a really good relationship with them, like training wise. You finished up your time working as the state training, one of the state training NCOs for the Florida National Guard on the active duty component side. What was your next move?
Next move was when I called DA again, Department of the Army, the assignments branch, and asked them what they had available. It was time for me to leave coming up pretty soon. Told them I expressed my desire that I'd like to go back to the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. And they told me, said, well, we're recruiting Ranger qualified people right now to go over there and set up a schools command, set up a school. So that's where I got orders to go back to Hawaii, where I was assigned to schools command. They were setting up a school there called the Light Fighter Program. And at that time, the 25th Division was transitioning from a regular infantry unit to a light infantry unit. And they had to go through some training, more like a mini Ranger training, I'll say, I guess, as a rites of passage to become light infantry. Every soldier, including the post commander, the general himself, had to go through that light fighters course. And it was a week long. They'd bring out a battalion at a time. We'd run them through the light fighter course. They would go back, and then the next week we'd get another battalion. And that was the main reason that I got to go back to Hawaii, was because we were still writing lesson plans and getting stuff ready to get that class off the ground and functioning. They're in that schools command at East Range, Hawaii. There was the light fighters course. Mm-hmm. There was air assault school, the Ranger indoctrination program for 25th Division, and a repel master course. And that's what we were training. All of those fit in the schools command. At first, I was just working in the light fighter part of the program. And for about the first year I was there, I was an instructor on the repel tower. And then we kind of, after we got most of the 25th Division ran through the light fighters course, we kind of consolidated, and we were all those other classes, schools that I mentioned, were kind of come together as one. So, mm-hmm. Oh, and then while I was there, they made what was that movie they made?
Oh, you mean you're talking about the episodes? It wasn't a movie, right? It was a series.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a series.
Tour of Duty.
Tour of Duty. Yeah, they made Tour of Duty while I was there. We got to look out the windows of our little shack and watch a lot of different scenes being shot out there. But that was that was probably one of the best assignments that I had, that I enjoyed as much or more than any of the rest of them. I really, really liked the people. They were all Ranger qualified. They were all professional. Mm-hmm. And we had zero trouble or incidents of anything. We done a lot.
I know before talking to you, you mentioned that one of the things that you liked about it was the fact that it was just kind of far away from the flagpole. You guys were just out in the middle of the woods. I mean, for people that haven't been to East Range, I don't even know if it's open today. I think they still use it as a training area, but I was part of the last, I was in the last air assault class in 2000. Was it 2006? No, 2005. In December of 2005, after I got back from deployment, I was in the very last air assault course. And we're talking about a small army. The commandant of that air assault course was Sergeant Major Ordonio. Awesome guy.
Who was an E5 that worked for me as an E5. I was E7. He was an E5.
He was one of the guys that looked me up and down and was like, what the hell happened to you? Like, because you were an NCO, you were tabbed out and done your drill sergeant time. And here I was just I think at the time I was a first lieutenant. And I had nothing on my chest. So the air assault badge was going to be the first thing that I put on there. But anyways, yeah, small army, because I had mentioned, I think you reached out to him and told him that I was stationed there.
Yeah, I
Right.
did.
And
I
then,
called him.
yeah. And then I was able to get into the last air assault school. So very fortunate with that. But for people that haven't been to East Range before, I mean, it's literally out in the middle of the woods, right? Located in Wahiawa.
Oh yeah, it's up in the mountains behind Wahiawa. Yeah, there was sometimes weeks go by before I'd ever go to Schofield Barracks. I'd leave home, I'd go straight to East Range, and it was all dirt roads up through there, and
Yep.
had a big fence around it, and pretty desolate. And we had little camouflage wooden shacks out there, and that was our offices. And we had a lieutenant colonel who was actually in charge of all of it, and a sergeant major. Then myself and Jimmy Akuna, we made E8, and we were NCOICs together of the entire schools command. Then we watched over the air assault and the RIP and
Yeah.
repel masters and all of them. And then after we both made E8, it was inevitable that we move on down the line and try to get a diamond put in our stripes. And we went out searching for first sergeant positions.
Mm-hmm.
I found one. I was not in an infantry unit. I found one in the 25th S&T Supply and Transportation Battalion, and I was relieving or taking the place of a first sergeant that was moving on. He was rotating out of Hawaii. I got to talk to this E8. Come to find out, this E8 was Frank D. Miller. You can Google his name and find him on the internet. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. Saw people say Medal of Honor winners. You don't win the Medal of Honor. You earn it. You receive it because you earn it. Frank Miller was an exceptionally different kind of person. He was a hero, and yet he was just sort of, I don't want to say laid back, but he was just calm. Nothing upset Frank Miller, and he was truly concerned about how I was going to treat the soldiers, his soldiers, after he left. You know, he made it clear they were all good people, and I didn't need to go in there and start trying to hang a bunch of them. And Frank sat down one day, just me and him, one-on-one, and he told me the story, the incidents around him receiving that Medal of Honor. That is a story or a time that I wish I'd have had more time with him, because as he told that story, you could tell he obviously told that story many, many times to other people. Frank would tell you that story, and it was like watching the best movie that you've ever seen in your life, and you get focused on it, and you just lose the rest of the world around you. Sitting there listening to Frank tell that story was, I just didn't want it to end. He told that story that well. But it was a real honor to have been able to step in the footprints where Frank had been the first sergeant. I had a lot to learn in that company. You know, I thought, well, this S&T battalion, Supply and Transportation, after being in infantry for 18 years, this is going to be a walk in the park. But I got in there with a whole bunch of different MOSs that I knew nothing about. So I had a lot of learning to do. And, you know, I had cooks in my company. And of course, when you're in the infantry, you think cooks are just, they're nothing to you. But you learn to respect everybody that's got a job, because they're all equally important. Without the cooks, we couldn't eat. If we didn't eat, we couldn't be an infantryman. So I had a lot to learn. I did learn a lot, and I was highly impressed with the professionalism. And I tried about the only thing I could do, because I was not proficient in their MOSs. Only thing I could do was take them out and try to PT them to death. And at first, they weren't in real good physical shape, because that's one thing I have to say. Frank did not do a lot of PT because he just wasn't able. You know, he's shot up too bad. So he had to turn the PT over to NCOs in his company. At first, they were pretty weak. But when I left there, I had probably the best physically fit supply and transportation people in the 25th Division.
So hang on a second. I want to explain to people how insanely good you are with running and PT, those things of that nature. So just give me an idea. Your what was your run like? Like what was your time back then? Average.
Back then, when I was in the S&T battalion.
Yeah, let's just say any time around then, because I know you were probably pretty consistent with your PT with your PT test.
Yeah, I ran. When I was 40 years old, I was running 2-mile PT tests in about 11 and a half minutes.
Now, let's not even mention the fact that you smoked cigarettes for 20 years.
Yeah, I smoked cigarettes the entire time I was in the service, almost, except for the last year.
So you ran 11-minute 2-mile runs, and I'm sure that wasn't even really nothing to you, right? And then you would smoke a cigarette afterwards.
Yes.
That's insane.
And I trained that S&T battalion. I had a whole bunch of them that wanted to run the Honolulu Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'm too old to run 26 miles. But if you want to, I'll try to train you. So I would take the ones that wanted to run in the marathon.
Yeah.
I'd take them out every morning and we'd run at least 10 miles. And I was always the first one back to the company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've stayed close together, but I was always in front. Nobody could
keep up.
Nobody could pass me up and beat me back to the company.
You know what? Honestly, I think when I was in the Army, that was the one thing that I always tried to do, was to try to stay in front of everyone else. Like whenever it came to PT and things like that, that's just what you're supposed to do as a leader. You're supposed to, charge ahead and try to be competitive and try to push everyone else to do their best. So
yeah,
that's I had to take a quick break on that and emphasize your physicality and your physical fitness, because I know that when I found out what your times were, your 2-mile times, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to get 11-minute 2-mile ever in my life. I'm not a runner like that.
My company commander, was Captain Heinrich, and he was a marathoner. He was a triathlon runner. Yeah. He run several triathlons, and he could run the 2 miles faster than I could. But when we do PT, I developed a thing for the S&T battalion. I called it the ditch line PT. And, in Hawaii, especially up there, Schofield Barracks in the mountains, it rained quite a few days sometimes. And we had PT, and ditch lines would get full of water, and it would get muddy, and we'd go out and do what I call ditch line PT. We'd run, then we'd just stop running, jump in a ditch full of water and do push-ups and sit-ups and just flop around like hogs. And, man, them kids, they loved that. They'd always ask, First Sergeant, we do ditch line PT today. It's raining. It's nasty out here.
Sometimes that was the thing, was to just prove how much nastier and how much dirtier you could get, and how deep you could dig, whenever it sucked. It was just the best thing to do, was just to do your best to enjoy it and laugh and just suck it up, basically, and just deal with it. You're going to get dirty today. You're going to get nasty today. You're going to sweat today. You're going to work your ass off today. And I think a lot of people feel a sense of accomplishment when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Captain Heinrich, I remember when he left just a few months before I did. And I can remember in his change of command ceremony, he got up there and at the podium, told the whole crowd, he said, I was real fortunate to get First Sergeant Phillips. He said, I'd never in my life would have thought that I could get a 40-year-old man that could hurt me in PT. But he said, I hurt places and have been sore in places since he got there that I never had before.
But yeah, no, I remember a lot of these guys that you're talking about, how impressive they are, like as far as physical fitness and just overall leadership. Where did you go to after you were the first sergeant of that unit, or was there anything else that you want to summarize to finish off that position and that time?
No, well, just after that, after I finished my tour in Hawaii and got my diamond, that's what I was looking for, was assigned for my last duty station was at Fort Riley, Kansas. I got there, and again, instead of being put in a regular T&E unit, I was assigned to as assistant commandant of the 1st Infantry Division NCO Academy. And that's where I spent my last 2 years in Fort Riley, Kansas.
With the big red one.
Big red one, yeah.
Hawaii to Fort Riley.
And, been with the NCO Academy, again, it was an area that was not up on main post. It was kind of just inside the gate, not too far. And there was nothing else around. It was in the old World War II wooden barracks building. And I hardly ever got up to the main post for any reason. And again, I've spent my last 2 years in a training capacity. A lot of good NCOs there too. They were professionals, been teaching classes there for quite a while, and they were all real strapped, spit shine boots, starch fatigues, and they were a good bunch of NCOs. Mm-hmm. Made my last tour very easy.
So I know right around this time was around the time that they started the Desert Storm, right?
Actually, I retired in January 91, so it was January of 90. I applied for my retirement. You could apply for your retirement 1 year in advance, and it was almost not more than 11 months out from my retirement. Mm-hmm. I'd already put in for retirement, and once you put in for it, there's no going back. You can't say, "Oh, I changed my mind. I want to stay in." You put in for your retirement, it's approved, and you're going to retire.
Right.
It's that simple. It was toward the end, I guess, of 1990 that they started having the conflicts with Iraq, and I'd already put in for retirement, so they didn't. If I hadn't put in for it when I did, or close to when I did, I would have probably got held back, and not allowed to retire until after Desert Storm was over.
Yeah. So how that would work is you would get a warning order, right? And that would pretty much, you would be stop loss.
Yeah. Just stop. But I'd already put in for it, so it wasn't even mentioned. My retirement went right on, just like
it was just timing,
just like it would have,
right?
If nothing was happening.
Finished up your 20-year career as a first sergeant at the NCO Academy in Fort Riley.
Yes, sir. And it was about 1 year prior to me getting out. It was in July of 1990, I guess. Someone had bought me some chewing gum to help me stop smoking. That inspired me to throw the cigarettes away, and I haven't had one since. I just wish I'd have done it 20 years earlier, 30 years earlier.
So just real quick, what were your thoughts about retiring and Desert Storm? And, how did you see it? Do you kind of wish that you had actually gone to Desert Storm, or is it something that you don't really feel like impacted a whole lot? I mean, because I know you have friends that actually went. One of your good buddies went to Desert Storm. And I mean, was it kind of hard after 20 years after serving and getting all that training and stuff to just have timing basically?
Well, going back 20 years, when I got drafted, I thought, my thought then was, I'm going to do as much as I can possibly do in 2 years, and then I'm going to get out. I wanted to go to Vietnam. I wanted to go to Vietnam real bad. I asked to go a couple of different times, and it didn't turn out that way. As far as Desert Storm, I think I didn't want to go to Desert Storm as bad as I did Vietnam, because I was planning on getting out. And if they had stopped me, it would I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it that much. But if I'd have been planning on going on and making a longer career out of it, then I think that
right,
I would have wanted the same way that I did going to Vietnam. I'd have wanted to go to Desert Storm too.
I completely understand, because when I was in, actually, they were doing a lot of stop loss, and I know people personally who had plans to get out. Like, they had family plans, they had plans to get out and get a job here, do this, move here, or whatever. And it wasn't fair, because they would do their time, they would do their deployment, and then they would come back. And just by circumstance of where they were at and the timing and where they were, what they were assigned to, they would get stop lost. And then, so basically that just meant, hey, you can't go anywhere, you can't retire, you can't ETS, can't get out, you got to go deploy again for another year. So
that's a different version of the draft.
It is. One of my old first sergeants, actually, that happened to him. He came back from Iraq, and then for some reason he had to go to a different company. And the new company he was going to, he goes there and he starts, doing his first sergeant thing. Then next thing you know, they get a warning order. So within, I think, let's say 8 months of him coming back from deployment, he had to go back to Iraq again. And this time he went as a first sergeant. So he was a master sergeant with us, promoted, E8, or I'm sorry, he was E7 with us, promoted as an E8. Then he went over to another company, got a warning order, and then next thing you know, he had to go back into Iraq in like 8 months. And it sucks, man, because it's just like you got family, you're at a different place in life. That's kind of how it was for me when I got out too. I got out in 2007, and when I got out, I made sure that I was going to have no IRR time or no reserve time, because I wanted to get out. Like, I didn't want to have this string still attached to me where at any point in time they could be like, hey, come back. So they counted my enlisted time while I was in the National Guard, as well as my active duty officer time. So it was a total of 8 years. So I got lucky with that. They initially tried to give me the IRR time, but I found the regulations that showed otherwise. So it was kind of on me. But at any rate, I just want to summarize everything. We've been talking for about 40 minutes again.
There's so many things that you run across in 20 years that you can't, it's impossible to cover them all. But when I look back on it myself, it was the best 20 years of my life. I don't regret a day of it. And if I had it all to do over, I'd do it about the same way.
And when you joined, how old were you?
I was 20 years old.
And so you weren't even old enough to drink yet. And that's why I say a lot of times when I talk to young people about, joining the military and I'm not sure, I don't know if that's what I want to do, whatever. And understand that when you're that young, a lot of times you don't know what's best for you. Like, if you give someone their druthers or what they want to do, they want to sit on the couch all day and play video games. Like, they want to stay within their comfort zone. They want to stay within their own community, within their own friends, within their own clique, but when you join the military, you get shipped out to basic or boot camp, whatever you go to, and you're forced to get along with people from all over the United States. And you're forced to get out of your comfort zone. You're forced to make decisions. You're forced to make decisions and screw up or succeed. And that's something that you can't do sitting at home on your couch. So, you turned a dreadful draft letter into a illustrious career of accomplishing a lot. And I think that's what people need to understand about the military is it is what you make of it. It's an opportunity.
Absolutely is.
So I mentioned to you before about that, about, if you ever often think about like what you would be doing. And I guess it's just kind of hard to imagine what you would be doing if you'd never gotten that draft letter.
I don't have any idea, but I guarantee you it wouldn't have been anything nearly as good as getting drafted.
Right. Okay.
My life would have been so much different. Probably not nearly as good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time. And, you've gotten 3 podcast episodes, about 40 minutes each. You've given us a 20-year span of your awesome military career. You did a lot of things and had a lot of folks that you came in contact with, and you changed their lives. And that's amazing in itself. And I know that's kind of one of my goals with this podcast is to reach out to people and to, talk about these types of stories or whatever. And people who are on the fence about joining the military, listen to these stories and listen to how things turned out for folks, and you decide for yourself, but be informed. In today's world, we have a lot of misinformation out there about the military, and I'm trying to broadcast this, put it out there for everyone so that they can hear these types of stories. We may never see another draft again. So hopefully not, but it's interesting to talk to you, Dad. And like I said before, it's so proud to be your son. And I've always looked up to you. I guess we'll just summarize everything and just say thank you very much. And maybe we'll have you on again, just talk about something else.
Okay. That sounds like a deal.
Everyone, thank you for tuning in today. And the next podcast we're going to have, I might do another interview. I'm not really sure yet, but we'll push out these 3 here, and then I'll announce what the other one's going to be. All right. So everyone have a great week. Stay safe, and we're out. You've been listening to the Morning Formation Podcast. I hope you found today's materials helpful and of value to your current situation. You can connect with me on Instagram at _morning_formation_podcast, or you can connect with me via email at theformationpodcaster@gmail.com. Also, I would like to thank my partners at Act Now Education for their support. Authenticity, community, and trusted is what you can expect from all members of the Act Now education team. You can link up with them today and learn about some new, free educational resources on their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at their website, actnoweducation.com. Whether today's show took you back to a nostalgic time or helped you think about tomorrow, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.